Yes, this is John G. Sutton, and welcome to Tales from the Jails. Uh, you've been listening to these broadcasts now, this is number 22, I believe, for some time now, and I did take a rather original look at the way to be a prison officer, and it wasn't conventional. I don't think it should have been conventional. I believe that that's the way you should do it. Do it right, do it by the rules, don't take any nonsense, and go for it. But it wasn't particularly well received by my colleagues at times, anyway. How does the hierarchy deal with what they would consider to be a maverick, which perhaps that was what I was thought to be? Well, in the year 1978, my annual report, because each prison officer has an annual report, my annual report read, written by a principal officer, in my opinion, prison officer Sutton is a cabbage. Seriously, those actual words. Prison officer Sutton is a cabbage. So you get to see, I think you're seen by the deputy governor or something like that, where they read your report to you and said, "Do you got a sign? Do you agree?" I said, "Not only do I not agree, I said it's completely fantastic. The man's obviously deluded. I mean, do I look as if I've got roots or green leaves around me or branches of a tree or something like that? Or I'm certainly am not, categorically not a cabbage. I'm not. I'm not vegetable. I'm a human being, a sentient human being, and I object to this annual report, and I will not acknowledge it." So I refused to sign to say that I accepted my annual report, and subsequently it was withdrawn, and somebody gave me they spoke to the principal officer and said, "Well, is Mr. Sutton a cabbage?" "Well, yes," he said, "I think he is a cabbage." Hey, that's delusional. Is that delusional or what? But it was just a little act of spite by the powers that be to try and get a needle in at me. Except I wasn't having it. So I didn't get that one. Dodged that one. But I was in charge of the hospital ward one day. This is a strange story, seriously. And I don't know, I must have annoyed the hierarchy a little bit more with my original approach to being a prison officer, but I was a hospital officer at this time. So I was in the hospital ward, and the governor came round with the chief officer on his rounds for the day. I reported the numbers to the governor, and at the time I was going around taking it, because every 4 hours or so you have to take all the patients' blood pressures, and record it. Blood pressures, temperature, pulse rate, just like you do in a normal hospital. I mean, we're dealing with patients here. So the governor came in with the chief officer, reported the numbers to him. "Thank you very much." He said, "Mr. Sutton," he said, "I want to speak to you about this." And he pointed to the floor. And on the floor there was a deep brown stain that had obviously been, when they laid the tiling on the floor, they had like linoleum tiling on the floor. When they'd laid this, it had been the adhesive that had spilt out. He says, I want you to tell me how this mark got here." I said, "Can you just give me one second?" And I went and got the red band. That's the prisoner who's responsible for cleaning the ward. I said, "I'd like you to meet the governor. Governor, this is inmate such and such a body. He is responsible for cleaning the ward floor. I'm the hospital officer. I'm responsible for looking after the patients." I said, "But if you want to discuss the marks on the floor, this is your man." And I walked off and started doing it. I tell you what, Norman Brown, the governor, he was not amused by that. And neither was my chief officer downstairs, the hospital chief officer. He phoned me up. What's all this about you introducing the governor to the red band cleaner? We're all responsible for this. I said, I'm hardly responsible for the flooring of the hospital ward that was laid before I even joined the prison service. It's not my responsibility if somebody spilt, the adhesive when they laid the tiles 15 years ago or whatever it was. It was just an attempt to give them some reason to actually proceed against me on disciplinary grounds. I did have a number of run-ins on disciplinary grounds. They never made any stick. I mean, they weren't thinking straight, if you ask me the truth of the matter. I mean, if I'd done something particularly wrong, then I'd put my hands up and say, yes, all right, I did that, but I didn't. All I did was try and do the job properly. And I tell you, the inmates actually, I didn't have any problem with the inmates. I had a bit of problem with the staff. I'll tell you a little bit about what subsequently happened and how I was assaulted whilst on duty by staff. And that's how I exited the prison service. But I'm not on this one. I'm just talking a little bit about the nasty tricks that were played on me. One nasty trick was played on me by a guy who I won't really name, but his name was Fat Fred. So if Fat Fred, who wears the hat on the back of his head, is watching this is about you, you sneaky bastard. Yeah, Fat Fred had been a auxiliary officer. That's you dress in prison officer's uniform, but you've not got a warrant card. You're not a prison officer. You're an assistant, and that's what he was for about 10 years. An assistant who took mainly he worked in the where they did the cookhouse, for the staff, the staff, and I'll tell you about that as well. Anyway, that's what he did. He took the prisoners from the prison down to the cookhouse and supervised them there, and that was his job for 10 years. And then he applied to join the prison service as a prison officer, failed the exam, and usually you get one chance. You fail it, that's it. But they gave him another chance, and he just about passed. I mean, failing the exam, you can do. Some people just aren't any good at taking exams. Some people are just stupid, like Fat Fred. Stupid person. Yeah, anyway, me and Fat Fred were working one day together. They put us together, and we were in one of the workhouses. Yeah, the work, where they work, in the prisoners working during the day. Me and Fat Fred. So I, being the senior officer, took over. I had the day book. I had everything, all the numbers right. And Fat Fred came down and sat next to me. I said, Fat Fred, you're supposed to be on the other side of this unit. I'm the officer in charge. Oh no, he said, I've got more service than you. I said, listen, go and take your seat over the other side, Fat Fred. Otherwise, we get visited by the duty principal officer. There's going to be an objection. And sure enough, within 5 minutes, the duty principal officer came in and said to me, why are you here, Mr. Sutton? Straight away. Why are you here? I said, I'm the officer in charge. He said, no, you're not. He said, Fat Fred is the officer in charge. He's got 15 years service in. I said, no, Fat Fred hasn't got 15 years service in. His service starts from the day that he became a prison officer, not an auxiliary officer. I said, and I am the senior officer here, and Fat Fred is not following my instructions. So if you've got any arguments, no. He says, I'm charging you with dereliction of duty and this, that and the other. So he actually did do that. Put me in front of the governor on they call it a half sheet, please explain. So I explained. I said my date of seniority is the 1st of January 1975. That's when I joined as a prison officer. Fat Fred, his date of seniority is something like 1978 or 77. I said, basically, he's very new to the service, although before he joined as a prison officer, he was an auxiliary officer. So they couldn't argue with that. They couldn't argue with it because that was absolutely the regulations. So that got thrown out. But these two, the principal officer and Fat Fred, had put their heads together to decide to stitch me up. So yeah, it wasn't the prisoners that you had to watch in that place. It was the staff, especially the creepy snake in the grass like Fat Fred, the miserable, ignorant bastard.